Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DL Ignite. Today, I've got Tamara with me, and we're going to talk about the changing culture of the remote workforce, especially in the context of COVID-19. Now, Tamara, you actually run a community for safety specialists. So first and foremost, tell people where they can get hold of you.
Well, yes, that's right, Tim. I do run a safety community. It's on LinkedIn, EHS Professionals. And we have different open discussions, live discussions, where members come and we have a chat, usually weekly. And so I invite people to come to those. But if you're looking to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, is the easiest place to get me.
Okay. Okay, and good. And so today what we're going to talk about is the changing culture of the remote workforce.
Mm-hmm.
I always prepare these calls before we do the interview. And you came up with a number of really interesting discussion points. Mm-hmm. One is that this change from the industrial mindset to the transformational leader. And I think even though we spoke probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's amazing how things have changed. Mm-hmm. I know that I found some research from Gartner, which said that 74% of CFOs, so chief financial officers, said that they would probably move staff to work remotely permanently. Mm-hmm. Now, that was a survey of 317 CFOs, but that was on the 30th of March.
Right.
Yeah.
And what were they saying last year?
Well, it would be interesting to hear what they were saying last year. I don't know. I doubt they were thinking that. But that figure of 74% may be higher than 74%. Now we're on, today's the 28th of April when we're doing this, so it's like a whole month later, and mm-hmm. The whole infrastructure is now in place. People have, everybody's been given Teams or Zoom or laptop. They've been sent home, and I think there's far more people understand what it's like to work remotely. We've all taken pictures of our Zoom stuff and we've put it on social media, and we've kind of moved through that phase. So I think we're now thinking about, to use the term that's come up, the new normal of this working together. So how are you seeing this change and transformation take place?
Well, it's interesting because I've either worked with people who are satellite remote workers for years, for decades, or I've been one myself, on and off throughout my career. So for me, the remote worker is not a new thing. It's something that's been happening a long time. And it's just that a lot of the rest of the world was behind, really, behind in technology, behind in really understanding the collaborative tools, as well as behind in knowing how to treat somebody who is a remote worker. For example, when people were in a room talking amongst themselves, and there's one person who's maybe just on a mic, how many times did you stop and think, oh, let's bring that person who's satellite into the conversation? My hope now is that some teams will be moving back to the office environment because some people's personality prefers that. Yeah. In other companies, that's the way they're going to want to go back to because it's old hat and they're used to it and that's their comfort blanket. They want to revert back to those old ways because that's where their comfy place is. My hope is that we have developed as workers to be more empathetic, to be more inclusive. Reach out to the satellite workers and make lunch. Create opportunities for collaboration and building rapport. My biggest concern, it's great that you're going to save money, but the flip side is, do you know how to maintain relations and rapport with satellite? Because it takes work. We at Safepedia or satellite I work in Toronto and they work in Edmonton. And there's a lot of elbow grease that goes into making that work. And, using more Skype or a visual audio tool that you can have a conversation with somebody as opposed to just sending an email or sending a text. It's not an excuse to just use a text type of communication. And so that's one of my concerns, as well as many others that have to do with, like, I have heard from people that their managers are struggling. The managers do not know how to handle managing people at a distance. So they're doing things now like having people track every single minute that they're at work, logging in right at a specific time, and proving that the person is actually at work and not just diddly dallying in their household. And that creates for a toxic work environment.
Very much so, yeah.
So there needs to be balance, and I think there also needs to be a shift in mindset.
Mm.
A lot of the ways that we were working was from the industrial era. But we have to remember that the industrial era started in the mid 1700s.
Yeah.
They didn't have all the technology and all the knowledge and the education that we've developed. So it's time that we come to our own century and start engaging in a more modern way.
And do you think that with more individual contributors working remotely, that, I've been on calls where you're all in an office and there's one person who's on a squawk box or whatever it's called, and you're quite right. No one ever turns to that person and says, "What do you think?" There's a conversation that goes on, and usually the other person then has to say, "Can I interject, please?" But now we're all on some sort of video call, and there's and we're all looking at each other. Do you think that therefore that we now need to have different skills?
Absolutely. Because now you need to even be more mindful that when you are in video conversation, there tends to be a lag. So what you may think is an end of a sentence is actually just a blip in technology or a connection break, for example. Or it might be the person taking a moment to think, to complete a thought. And so I think that leadership is going to have to up the game in their people management skills. They're going to have to become more um, innovative in the way that they're getting teams to do work together. They really need to, in my opinion, manage the group dynamics and watch that there isn't siloing going on, where a few people that tend to click and get together really well start working as a little, you know, click, I guess is what the word we could use for it. And oh, isn't that great? Look at how great they're working along. But then there's this one person who's not, and saying, well, that person's the problem. Step it back a minute. Is that person being brought in? Do they feel welcome? Do they feel like they're part of the team? Because there's going to be a lot more things that you're going to have to be attuned to as a leader and as a manager about managing your group now. And you might actually see things that were problems in the office now being more prominent because they're playing out on a visual screen also, right?
And what do you think, as we move from this industrial mindset to transformational leader, what are the skills do you think that we need to have? And do you have any examples?
I think that we have to make sure that people are not disconnected from one another. I think that people are going to be really focused on a productivity focus, and is productivity up? And they may not be looking at how is the group dynamics, How are people collaborating? If people are collaborating, they may fall into it's easier if people just email mindset,
Mm.
as opposed to doing the hard work, like as I do as a community developer. That's what you're doing now. As a leader, as a manager of people, you're holding up your own communities. And that takes a lot of engagement. It takes a lot of coming out of yourself, being selfless, being a selfless leader, and asking, what can I provide you? What do you need? More than saying, this is what I need from you.
So this is more servant leadership than traditional leadership, you would
Well,
say.
we can put names on it, but I don't think that really matters.
Okay.
I think what's really more important than labels is is taking a step back as a manager or as a leader, and really looking from a higher viewpoint, not in the weeds, not in amongst the trees, but higher up, is how are groups actually engaging and interacting in my company? Are we still creating the culture that we want? Because a culture is a group of people's beliefs, common values, and behaviors, right?
Mm.
So you still need to you still need to cognitively develop that. And I don't think a lot of places were very good at it when they were in people form together. So it's going to be even more challenging now that they're having to do it from a distance. And that means, like I was saying to you before, people keep using the word podcast for what I do, and it's not a podcast. A podcast is where, the host is the one in control. The host sets the stage, and the host delivers the questions, and the person who's interviewing then responds in inappropriate. Whereas
Like we're doing now.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas community is, people come with their own questions, their own needs, and a common collective purpose. And so that's what remote working needs to be more like. Does
And
that
yeah, yeah, yeah. And do
Does
you
that
think there's
explain
going to
clearly?
be, yeah, and do you think there's going to be an impact on workplace diversity?
Hmm. No,
Okay.
no. And the reason for that is because repetitively you keep seeing um, the hiring practices to be hiring certain groups in certain areas. And when it comes to leadership, I have yet to see a company that has a fair representation of the workforce in their leadership team.
Mm. True.
So if we're not doing it yet, remote working is not going to help with that, because
Mm.
now those people of diversity are less seen by the
Yes.
leaders, right? So now you're going to go to your unconscious bias even more. So I think that's an area that, if you want to be a leader that is for your people, then that should help keep you up at night too.
Mm.
Am I providing fair representation of all the people who work here? Or am I leaning on a biased?
And I think that one of the things that we see with diversity, or with certainly what I'm seeing with more video calls, is the fact that introverts will generally step back, extroverts then come forward, and it's you're quite often you get people dominating the conversation even more so on video than they would
Mhm.
do in a particular meeting. Do you see that as well?
Horrifically. Sometimes I think that the manager needs to mute people. There needs to be like a rule that you have a certain amount of talk time, and once you go over it, there's going to be some sort of indicator, because that's not how people can collaborate. When you have a 30-minute meeting and one person takes up 20 minutes of it, really, How are you hearing from everybody on the team? And why do people continue to use the excuse of that's just the way the person is?
Yeah.
Unacceptable. If you're a people's manager, if that's your job is to manage people, then step it up and do it. Because what you're actually doing in the group is you're allowing the informal leader to dominate and take control, as well as other people, even if they don't agree with what's going on, they're going to be quiet about it because now they're going to be fearful that if they speak up, then there will be repercussions.
Yeah. And do you see that there's an impact on trust? I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot in leadership and management is trust. How do you see that working with a remote workforce?
I think for the executive team, it was hard to gain trust in the first place, just in a physical environment, because often the executive team would just talk amongst themselves. You might see them walk in the hallway. You might see them in a staff meeting, maybe if they felt it was worthy of their time to grace you with their presence, you know. But now with video, they can log in, not be on video, and just be muted in the corner, just listening. They don't even have to. And I've seen that happen.
Wow.
Where the executive's there, but they're working, doing more important things, right? They're just listening. So that's not a leader to me, in my opinion. I'm very fortunate where I work at Safeopedia that both Scott and Jamie are very engaged. You actually see them out on social media. They're actually out there engaging. And so I'm right now in an environment where I had two phenomenal leaders who roll up their sleeves and really help, cultivate and develop their talent. But it's taken, over 25 years in the workforce to find two people like that. So they're rare. And there really are, those type of leaders we need more of.
Yeah.
Because they bring, and I actually, I'm just going to, one more thought.
Yeah.
Because when I'm thinking about both of them and the reason why I'm chose to work with them, and the key thing here is that they bring out the awesome of their staff.
Right.
They understand that every single staff member is different. They do not expect the same as from me as they did from somebody else. And even when one person left because they got another job at Philips, just a phenomenal, doing a global safety, and they were like, this is so great, we're so happy for you, if you ever want to be doing work with us again, please come back. And it was a party that this person was moving on to a new chapter of their journey of life. And now we're having a Safety Connect conference in October, and it's free for everybody to attend. But the amazing thing is Brian, the person that I'm talking about, who was just a phenomenal team member, he's going to be actually coming back and helping with the conference.
Wow.
How many times do you see that in a company where the CEOs actually go and say, hey, you know what, we're doing this, we'd really, really appreciate if you could come and host and be part of the team again? I've never seen that.
And do you see that there is a difference between management and leadership, and what do you think that is?
Yes, there is a difference between management and leadership. Leadership is about empowering people in a collective form. It's more about the collective, the larger company, providing a vision and giving people real energy that they collectively can conquer the world. Right? That's what I'm getting when I'm working at Safeopedia. Like there is the group of us, if we all come together and work together, there is nothing we can't accomplish. And then and we think like, oh, can we do that? Oh, we don't know. And Jamie and Scott is like, well, why don't we just try it and see, Okay. So we tried it and see, and yeah, the first time we did it, we weren't professionals at it because we're amateurs. It was our first time, but you did it, and they're like, well, see, you did it. Yeah. Okay, so then you do it again. And then the more you're doing it, the better you get, right?
Mm.
Because like when I started, when I did the podcast, I was doing the women in safety, and I still do the women in safety. I moved to doing the community work more because that's more of what I do. But when I first started it, I wasn't a podcaster. And I was like, I don't know if I can do a podcast. And Jamie is like, just give it a shot. Why
Yeah.
not? Like
Why
other
not?
people are doing it. And then, yeah, I was actually pretty good at it. People, when I have guests, they're like, wow, you make me so comfortable. And I was like, well, I didn't even know I had that talent. Good leaders highlight talent in you you don't even know exists.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You know, and I think good managers can also do that in another way. I'm thinking of Dan McLean, who was my manager. And, you know, the great thing about Dan McLean when I worked with him as a manager was I would come to him with something that I thought at the time was a problem that I was struggling with, because that's what you do with managers, right? You go, I'm working on this and I just can't get past this point here. Do you have any recommendations? And so he was an interesting guy because he loved to go jogging and exercising and stuff, right?
Mm.
And he'd ask you, he'd like, hey, you know, do you feel like going into a meeting room today, or do you maybe want to go out and walk around the block, right? And I was like, you know what, I think fresh air would be good. Let's go out and walk around the block. Again, good managers give you what they see you need.
Yeah.
If you see somebody's always at their desk working, they don't take lunch and they don't move, instead of having a meeting in a room, do what Dan McLean did. Get people to
Great
go out
idea.
and walk around the block,
Mm.
right? Because that's what he was doing. Like he was noticing that people weren't getting out enough and getting that fresh air. And so then you get out and you're walking around and you're talking things through, and all of a sudden change of scenery, change of airflow, you know, the energy starts coming back, ideas start coming into your head.
Mm.
And so you walk into the manager saying you're struggling having this issue, but then you walk out with having solved it with them sharing experiences of their own past and how they might have dealt with things, but coming out with your own solution as an employee, so that when that problem happens again, a good manager makes sure that you have the tools and the knowledge to solve that problem by yourself later.
Yes.
That's what a good manager does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, because they're more task oriented, right, on the day-to-day front. And then a good manager also encourages their employees to share solutions and problem solve amongst the team.
Yes.
A poor manager will always satellite in and try to be the one who's smarter and capable.
Yeah.
A good manager, I noticed this with Dan McLean too, is that you ask him something, he'll say, hey, you know what? Greg was working on something very similar when he worked at Rogers. Maybe Greg might be the better person to go to. And they start pairing people up that have skills to share with the other person. And that's a very smart way for a manager to build group dynamics and build trust.
Yep.
In a team. And it can be done remotely. Like I don't want to get away from our discussion about remote, because it is also important. And I think that's something that managers can do today, is if you're finding that employees are having more struggles, pair them up with somebody else who is doing a little stronger and create those opportunities for connections. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to work at networking your own teams.
And do you think, I mean, we're all social animals. Do you think that, I mean, you've done this, you know, you created a community. And I love this idea that a community rather than a podcast. Do you think it, you know, what can we do to create community amongst the individual contributors, the workforce, without it getting boring?
You know, I had a very interesting woman for a leader once, Christy. And I'm sorry, Christy, your last name is escaping my mind right now. But she was just phenomenal at creating little events for her teams to do. Right? So sometimes it would be like a potluck lunch.
What's that?
a potluck. So everybody brings one dish
Oh yeah.
and shares it. And they would get a meeting room, or sometimes they would get a picnic table outside if it was nice in a park. And so they would have lunch together. So about once a month, Christy would make this the group has lunch together thing, and it bonded the group. That group was very close. And the other thing that Christy would do would be getting groups of people working on projects together that don't normally work together in the team. So purposely creating a project team to look after something, to again create that environment where they needed to come together. So those are two examples that I think people can do right now. Even online, you can still have a virtual lunch for your team, right?
Yes.
You can have a virtual there's a name for it in Britain, where when you have a meeting but it's not about work. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know. So then we have a team call every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the team call is not about me; it's actually about the team.
Okay.
The team is supposed to run it.
Yeah.
And the last time we had the team call, 2 people said that we would do fancy dress.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to turn up to the team call. It will be the end of next week in fancy dress.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It has nothing to do with work.
Well, we're just going to sit and chat right now.
Right.
I think it's really important that we actually have an environment where people can get on and say, "I'm stuck," or "I'm tearing my hair out." I'm being ironic, or it's just something where you say, is that where we can just talk about things, and it's just and as I say, it's not my call as CEO; it's their call, and
that's right.
They decide the agenda.
Right. Right. Exactly. That type of thing. And I do also think that there needs to be opportunity to have that kind of team call where it might be also work related. Right. That one's a little bit more difficult.
Well, one of the things I do is I try and get people to come along and talk about what they've learned that week, because we all learn something in a week, and or just say what something that you feel that you're happy or you're blessed about.
Yes.
And we quite often learn, or we right now, this is my 6th week in self-isolation, I miss going and commuting into London, which I didn't think I'd ever say.
Yeah. But just that regular routine.
Yes.
You don't realize until it's gone how much it actually kicks off your day. Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that managers can do today, even in this climate, is rotate who is the lead of the meeting.
Yes.
The name even escapes me right now, but the person who is in charge of the meeting, rotate that around the group.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't, why is it always, and that goes back to that industrial mindset, right? Where you've got the management and you've got the workers. And the management always tells the workers what to do. It always descends down, right? And we're not in that era anymore. So a transformational workforce is more where it's fluid. People with the expertise are the ones who should be managing the meetings.
Yes.
Right. And so, so if you're going to have to discuss something that's in somebody's wheelhouse, give that person the reins of being a leader. And that's also a way of developing out your teams. And not everybody's going to be as strong at it as first. And I think everybody, especially the manager, needs to be velvet glove in their comments. This, one of my concerns is the gossiping. It was really bad in the office environment, people gossiping about one another. And the thing about video is it can lend for two people to get online and start talking bad about people. And I think people need to really step back from doing that. And remember that there's no playbook for this. We've never gone through anything like this before, and we need to be kind to one another. I was talking to my friend Eric, and that was one thing that he was talking about was kindness, organizational kindness, that we just don't have it anymore. And how do we get back to that? And I think the leaders in management should be harnessed with that.
I do.
What kind of acts of kindness are going on? And in your management, like as a CEO, that is something that maybe be checking in with your leaders. What kind of acts of kindness are you seeing?
Yeah, maybe you should have a KPI around kindness or something like that. But I'm kind of thinking aloud. But one of the things that Adam Gray, my co-founder, and I have constantly said is that we don't have all the good ideas. And what we're looking for are people to step up and offer good ideas, and we're looking for people to challenge. And I think that there's too much of that old hierarchy of where people, because they have a particular job title, they expect them to say certain things or wait for them to talk. Whereas, I think I love your idea of corporate kindness, and the way that actually, there's nothing that I like more than someone else, me having to work with somebody else, but not as a hierarchy, but basically as an equal.
Well, and I think we need to step it back and what does leadership really mean? Does it mean somebody with a title?
No.
Right.
It shouldn't be.
Or does it mean somebody that has the ability to elevate others?
I think
I'm just thinking out of my head here.
Yeah. I think there's a number of things about leadership. One is that you have to. You have to bring your job as a leader is to bring other people in effect to your level. Your job is in effect to put yourself out of work. If we take, there should be. I took on somebody and I said, I'm going to train you to leave my company.
Right.
Yeah. And they said, oh, no, I'm going to stay with you forever. And I said, no, I'm going to train you, and you're going to come to me one day and go, I've actually taken, and I'm going to use everything that you've taught me, but I found this better job. And I think there's nothing wrong in that. I think that there's nothing you talked about earlier on. I mean, there's something wonderful about seeing other people achieve their dreams or achieve what they want to do, and that won't always be within your company.
That's right.
Yeah. And watching someone go, well, I helped that person.
Yeah.
And it's the same, on there's a lot of people on social who, when I first started getting on social, who mentored me, and I remember that. And I think that's as a mentoring as a leader, I think is important. And I think too often it's about being directive, and actually what we need to be is cooperative. And of course, as leaders, we have to set the example as well.
Yes, absolutely. Do what you want other people to be engaging in yourself.
Yes,
absolutely. And I think a lot of people miss that mark.
Yeah, and I've worked as an individual contributor where people would say, you have to get people to do things, and you don't have authority over them. And there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, as individual contributors, I would expect the individual contributors in my company to show leadership just as much as to be a contributor.
And to build on that, a very critical part of that is not stealing other people's ideas as a leader.
Oh, yes.
That drives me nuts. I have worked in places where I've said something, and then the next thing, I've said it to a manager,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure if that's a good idea." And the next thing is coming out of the CEO's mouth.
Yes.
How, "Oh, we're going to do this great idea from, so and so." Well, why would I want to continue to work with somebody who siphons off ideas and then
I've worked
prop
for people.
themselves up?
I remember being on a call with somebody where the manager, and they said, "Why don't you come up with any ideas to the whole team?" And I rang up one of my German colleague and I said, "Are you not coming up with ideas the same reason why I don't come up with ideas? Because the manager just steals them and basically calls them his own." And they said, "Yeah," and the whole team agreed. And what happened was that the situation was that the manager was not seen as innovative, because the team was sitting there. We will innovate if you go, that was Tim's idea, and that was the other person's idea.
And let me give you, as a CEO right now, in front of a person who's usually a worker bee, let me give you a heads up on something.
Okay.
When we see that happening, and it happens several times, do you know what we do as workers is we stop giving the ideas in hopes, and this is where we hope the CEO can read minds. We do. As employees, we really think you guys can read minds, by the way. I just want to put that out there so that you understand that as a CEO. It's an expectation, a crystal ball or something you've got there.
Yeah.
That when no more ideas are coming from this manager, you might clue in that maybe the ideas weren't coming from the manager, but were actually coming from the employees who have now decided to stop giving the manager ideas, so the manager can sit in front of you, the CEO, and not have any new ideas. And by some way of osmosis, you as the CEO, being the great leader that you are, will figure this all out. Yes. I know it's not reality. I know that doesn't make sense when you say it out loud, but that's how employees try to silently get a message up to the executive level. And that needs to be broken. And maybe as a CEO, you can speak to that. If I'm an employee and I'm going through something like this, Tim, what can I be doing to get the CEO's attention to this?
Sorry, is that a question?
Yeah. I just turned this around. I'm interviewing.
Oh, right.
I don't know how that happened.
So I work for a VP, and he had managers below him, and he said the most difficult thing for him was the fact that he was in effect getting the employees to do things, but he had to do it through other people. And he said that's one of the things that's never really described when you say, "I want to move into management." Because the expectation is that you can basically open the door and shout and go, tell someone to do something and shut the door, and you expect them to do it. But he said it's really difficult to actually know that that's going on. And I mean, I've worked for managers where they've taken ideas and then they've called them their own. And of course, I agree with you. Then the innovation completely dries up. Why would you do something if you're not going to get the credit for it?
And my pet peeve is that there's some executive levels. I've heard this from a CEO, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth, that it doesn't matter where ideas come from. It's just that the idea is there. And I disagree with that. It does matter where ideas come from, because you can determine, based on the idea generators, who can help your company grow.
Yes.
Right. So just to your point, exactly, where if it's being cloaked, and then when we stop giving the ideas, your company is stunted.
Yes.
Or we leave, your company is stunted.
Yeah.
And then you're just left with a manager who never had any ideas anyway.
Yeah.
But you're still paying them.
Yeah. It's true.
So, do you think that there's a way of upsetting the apple cart in this area? Is there maybe the fact that we're getting to have to reset to a new type of normal, that we can maybe break some things and kind of construct them in a different way?
I think that we need to look at. It's very difficult as a leader to make sure that everything that the people say is, how do I, so people will always come up with ideas. You have to create a culture that to allow that. It is one of the things you have to do as a leader is to spot toxicity within an organization, and you have to deal with it and get rid of it. And it's one of the things that quite often is not necessary. It's never really talked about. And it's kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to leadership. And toxicity within an organization will kill your company. And taking people on who are toxic, you have to get it out the company. And that's really important.
And I mean, I heard somebody say this to me, where there was toxicity going on and upper management knew about it, but they didn't do anything. And then when it came to asking the ultimate person in charge, the CEO, their answer was, well, I have to trust my executives. I have to trust that team, that they're always telling me the truth. And the fact is, like, no, you don't. You need to use your leadership brain and evaluate. And if you see that they're behaving in a way that is counter to the values and the beliefs that you're spewing out to the rest of the company, if you're standing up there and saying, we don't allow this, we don't believe in this, we think this way, we want to behave this way, and your management team is not doing that, get rid of them. Because otherwise, the only thing you're going to get rid of is the respect from your employees.
Yes, totally agree.
Sorry, I was a little passionate there.
No, it
really bugged me.
No, it's true. And the thing is that as a leader, you need to better spot toxicity, and you need to deal with it. And dealing with it is usually about, I've had conversations with people in my team where they exhibit certain behaviors which I wouldn't see as the behaviors that I would expect from a leader. And so what you would do is that you usually have a conversation, and the conversation is, they go, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And when we all move on. But, I've also had people who were toxic work for me, and I've made the mistake of not dealing with it early enough. And when finally the person actually left, actually heaving a sigh of relief, and it was like, this is it's like a weight lifting off you. And my recommendation to all people is, if you smell toxicity in the recruitment process, don't take the person on. And then if you spot it at all, you have to deal with it, and you have to deal with it quickly, because that behavior will destroy your organization, and it only needs to be one person.
Yeah. And dealing with it doesn't mean firing the person off the top. As you said, when I say deal with it, then you sit down and you have a candid conversation.
Yes.
You observe how they're behaving. You find out what is actually going on, and then you utilize that as examples. I noticed that when you're engaging in this way, then the employee's reaction is this. Are you aware of that? Are you aware that this is going on? As you said, they may be like, oh my God, I didn't even see that. Because they also have their own stresses that are in their head, keeping them up at night. And, there's a lot of good people that when they're under that stress can behave abrasively. And so maybe what that person needs is a coach. Maybe they need somebody that they can be talking to, because they could even be having problems in their own personal life.
Yes.
We have to remember, executives are people too. They have their own personal lives. They might be going through a divorce or having a child that's causing some, behavioral issues, causing some stress, or maybe a parent or a housing situation. We don't know. They have the same problems we do. right? And I think, and it goes back to the kindness.
Yeah.
We have to be kind to them too, to understand
Yes.
too. The other thing I wanted to kind of trip back a moment, where we were talking about leaders having open conversations
Mm.
and being candid and frank, and not always agreeing with a leader. And it was interesting because I did work with one gentleman, Mark Jane, and he was just phenomenal. I remember at one particular time he had set up a meeting where he was there, and there was a group of employees, and everybody was kind of just shaking their head, and then he said something, and and he's like, he believed that he had it on point, right? And I came out and I said, no, I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. If that's what you see as an employee, I'm not seeing it. And it was about diversity being represented, right? And at first he was shocked, right? He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, thank you for," and he thanked me. He said, "Well,
Mm.
thank you for
Yeah, I
for
would thank you.
letting me know this," right?
Yeah.
And then he started asking other people at the table who initially had been kind of like in agreement, and then more people were starting to come out
Mm.
and talk to him about what they were feeling. And so that's how a lot of the diversity change came way, was because that CEO noticed there might be a problem, was told, to check it out, and then he checked it out. And then once one person was just, said, "Yeah, no, sorry, that's not the way we as employees are seeing it," you know, it also allowed for more employees to come out and
Mm.
start sharing how they really felt.
Mm. That's good.
And I think as a CEO, one of the barometers you can be using is if you go to every single meeting and every meeting everybody's agreeing, there's something wrong.
Mm.
Would you agree or
I,
disagree?
I would agree. Yes. I'd want people to challenge me. I would want, if I was saying something and it was wrong, then you need to have people that can challenge. And that's a cultural thing. It's a way of creating a culture where people feel that they are able to challenge you and not get fired.
Now, here's a question for you: is how can other CEOs, maybe there's somebody sitting listening to this discussion right now in the audience, and maybe that person is saying, well, this is really great, but what are some practical ways that I can be encouraging as a CEO my employees to be coming more forward and feeling comfortable? So as a CEO, what would you share with other CEOs?
I think there's a number of things. I think that we've covered a number of things in terms of you've got to ask questions. You've got to spot the people. If we're taking calls, you've got to spot the people that are being quiet, and basically, ask everybody's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a tenor of and spot the toxicity. And spot, if people are behaving in a particular way, you need to deal with it straight away. Always timely conversations. You can't let it slip.
Mm-hmm.
For me, one of the things that I've done to try and be better as a CEO is read.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a vivacious reader. A lot of things I've come across. I was very lucky in my last job. They put me through what was their management training, which again was about making sure that you listen and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I've picked up a lot from reading particular management books,
Mm-hmm.
and I would always recommend, for people to do that. And also, the other thing is to try and seek out a mentor.
Yes, yeah.
And
I don't
I
think a lot of
think that,
people do that.
yeah, and I think as a CEO that you shouldn't be. I'm a great believer in the growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and I'm a great believer that we can all learn something, and we've all got something to learn from other people. And I think that there's a great opportunity for CEOs to say, So, for example, there's a book called The $1 Trillion Coach, which is about he was a coach, and he basically coached the two guys from Google. Steve Jobs, and they reckon it was called $1 trillion because they reckon that all the companies together that he was coaching was $1 trillion. But my point being, Steve Jobs had a leadership coach.
Yes.
And if Steve Jobs can have a leadership coach, then everybody out there can have one as well. And there should be no shame or feeling of vulnerability because of it.
And that's interesting. You say the feeling of shame or vulnerability. There is a stigma.
Yeah, I'm a big,
and that needs to be broken.
I'm a big Brene Brown fan and leader, and from a way as a leader for you to show your the fact that you are an ordinary person. She's a great person. Books like Dare to Lead and things like that are great places to basically go and read and go, there isn't anything wrong with feeling vulnerable or being shameful or or going into a meeting and not knowing, and asking questions, because you don't have all the answers.
No, you don't. And I'm thinking about stuff that I have read myself. And one of the books that is coming to my mind is by Rosa Corello. And she wrote a book that's called The Relationship Factor in Safety Leadership. And it really walks you through also some beliefs that strong leaders have, as well as, a strategic model for relationship, conversation, and leadership. And I think what you're saying is so true about reading, and reading different ways of engaging with your teams and workers. And I do think that there's a lot of fall down in actually just building relationships and rapport with employees. Again, it's going back to that industrial mindset of I'm in the CEO, the leadership position, and so I don't talk to the common people. We're not of that generation. Okay? You are not royalty. You are not better than us. We are humans. Humans, as you said, are social. So take that time to connect. A lot of great leaders, the one thing that I do when I'm reading about them or I'm listening to them is the repetitive pattern of them saying that they talk to their employees. They actually I remember one gentleman, I can't remember his name now, where he would start his day every day walking through the plant, and for over an hour would just go and talk to the employees. And the employees actually knew the person, and he had relations with them. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm so busy. Well, if your employees are running your business, shouldn't that be something that is of value for your time?
Yeah.
When you're putting dollars and cents on your time, and like, even if you're in an office or something, Mark Jane used to, when I first started working at Intellects with him, he would use the elevator as an opportunity to, if he saw one of his employees, to actually start engaging in a little bit of a conversation. Or if he was just walking through the office to go to the bathroom, again, he would use that opportunity to say hi to people instead of just walking through and ignoring everybody. And those little things cultivated a feeling that the person was approachable.
Yes.
And that's the big thing, is that as a CEO, do your employees believe you're approachable?
Yes.
Because if you say I have an open door
test.
If you say this trending slogan of my door is always open,
yeah,
but then you just go whipping by the office and you don't even have the wherewithal of a social etiquette to say, hi, hope you're having a good day. Clearly you're not approachable. And I think that we need to, like we were talking about, how do we go from an industrial mindset to more of a transformational? Things like that is what will push us, because transformational is the mindset of being engaged, relationship building, and kindness to
Yes.
others,
Yeah.
and being selfless.
Yes. And Tamara, that is a great way to finish our conversation today. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I've learned a lot. We've actually had 2 people watching us as well, so I hope they've actually learned something as well. Tamara, thank you very much. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Wait, we have people watching us?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. Now I found them. Lisa and Ian.
Yes.
Hi, Lisa and Ian. Did you have any questions? Can they type to us?
They can ask questions, yeah.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. As I said, I have the EHS Professionals group. And if you have a question, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can also watch for the safety community discussions. I am actually going to start broadcasting them live on Facebook also.
Wow.
Yeah. So take it there. That's very cool. I didn't know that.
Cool. Absolutely.
Watching here.
Yeah. Tamara, it's been great talking to you.
Yep.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah. Stay safe.
You too. Stay safe.